Hey, Bobby Manning here. Welcome to a Friday edition of the Garden Report. It's Celtics on to the East Finals with about a week off here, so got plenty of time to get into some of these other teams they could see in the East Finals, namely the Pacers, who we're going to talk about here today, and of course the Knicks on the verge of moving on tonight if they can beat Indiana on the road in Game 6, 8:30 tonight. Scott Agness comes to us from Indiana, Fieldhouse Files. You can check out all his work over there and on Twitter. Uh, One of the most prolific reporters covering the Pacers, certainly. I've followed his work for a long time, and I think it's the first time we've had you here on the Garden Report, Scott, so great to have you.
Yeah, man. What's up? It's good to be on with you.
So, where are you at? I know you were just saying a few minutes ago, don't feel great about the Pacers moving on here, down 3-2. But they've shown decently in this series, I feel like. The problem, I guess, is that the Knicks are so banged up. They had an opportunity to actually go and win this series, and they're not in a great position to do that right now. So, why do you think that is?
Yeah, I mean, going into this, first of all, they wouldn't have gotten past the Milwaukee Bucks if the Bucks were at full strength, right? Like I don't see
Right.
that possible, even despite the fact that the Bucks just never clicked, it felt like this year. So much changeover, and that's a whole different thing. But the fact the Pacers beat them at 8 of 11 meetings this year. Then you get to the second round, and Mitchell Robinson goes down, then OG Anunoby. And so all those things certainly are favoring the Pacers. The thing is, the mental toughness, the determination, the team chemistry, all that seems to favor the Knicks. And so it felt like game 5 in particular was just a huge missed opportunity. And more than that, they laid an egg. They got totally mollywop, like completely handled. And that's what is concerning if you're the Pacers. And when you're reviewing things, like there's not one thing I think you take positive from the last game. Now, they have been a good team at responding to losses this season, no doubt. They usually rise to the level of their competition, but they got to win their next 2 against a very tough, hard-nosed Knicks team. That's why I think it's such a tall task.
Yeah, and when you look at the series so far, their wins, the Nemhart prayer that went down, and then the game 4, which I've never seen a team more exhausted than the Knicks that night. And Obi Toppin was great, came out, ton of energy, uh, energetic effort, probably one of the better Pacers wins this year in terms of playing their style and, uh, bothering the opponent with that style. And at that point, I'm like, all right, this might be starting to shift in Indiana's favor, especially with New York's health where it was at that point. It just looked like they had nothing left in the tank. And then for 2 days later, for it to turn 180, like you mentioned there, and it just be all out Knicks dominance. It's been a strange series in that sense. And it definitely looked like early, despite some close games, the Knicks had the upper hand. But you're right. It's a lost opportunity here, at least right now with where it stands, it looks like for Indiana, because the Knicks just looked completely depleted at that point. And I don't know. It was honestly one of the most shocking games I've seen this postseason, the Knicks coming out and dominating the way they did in game 5. And I know, the whole series has kind of gone home court direction here, and that's probably good for the Pacers tonight. But that was shocking the other night.
It was just because of the level of, to use one of Rick Carlisle's words, disposition, the toughness to get things started. I mean, the fact that Isaiah Hartenstein had an offensive rebound, kicked it out to Brunson, and that's how you started this game. I mean, that was as predictable as possible. You got to eliminate the rebounds, the offensive rebounds. They didn't win the 50-50 balls, and then just were thoroughly outplayed in that one. And so that was alarming. But now I will say you come home here to Indianapolis where they're 10-0. They haven't lost in, I think tomorrow will be exactly 2 months. So they have been very good on their home court. I expect for a incredible sellout crowd to help them, just like the Knicks got that big electric boost from MSG. But is that enough to put them over the top? Or, where I'm curious here is, will the Knicks come in and just punish them? Will they be deliberate and decisive in how they play and just try to knock the Pacers out early? Or do they allow for Indiana to hang around, make this competitive? It comes down to the last few minutes, much like the Knicks playoff games all have.
Yeah, and they got the extra day too here, and that was because of they had to move the game, right, with Caitlin Clark's debut.
Yeah, that's why you had an extra day, because last night was Caitlin Clark's and the Fever's home opener. And so I'm all for that, by the way. Like, we already have seen the schedule now for the Eastern Conference Finals. It's like every other day. This is the best basketball. Like, why aren't we allowing time both for the teams and the players to be healthy, to be more fresh, and on top of that, for more positive discourse, to have a day to kind of discuss what happened, I feel like, in the last game. And then the next day, you can advance it. What did they say at practice? What are you looking for in the next game? I would really like to have a little bit more spacing there. I don't need 7 games in the first round. I would love to see that be a change, but I don't see that happening just because it's a more revenue generator with more possible games like they have.
Yeah, and then you sit here after if you have a 5-game series with a week off, which I don't love either here in the Celtics case, and that can be
Want to
good
trade?
or bad.
I would love a week off. That sounds phenomenal.
Well, you can balance it out like you talked about, like more time between the games in the series, and then there'll be less time between series theoretically there. And I think that works out well when you start the series early. Like if this thing was getting started on Sunday and the, Knicks, and for some reason the West Finals determined that too. So once the Wolves won last night, there was no way of the East Finals getting started on Sunday, even if the Knicks win tonight. So you're just going to have that every other day in these finals, like you mentioned there, and there's going to be no space between games with only 4 teams left. So I don't know. That's a little annoyance to me too. We'll get into some of the keys to this game tonight here. 8:30 getting started. It's about to be some late night action in the NBA at this point, and with just a couple of rounds to go, check out our official daily fantasy sports partner, Prize Picks here. Go to prizepicks.com/CLNS. See all the projections for tonight. That's my favorite part, jumping into the app. Who's going to score what, who's going to grab the right amount of rebounds, assists. Just pick 2 players, pick more or less than those projections, and you're off here. Use the code CLNS to get a 100% deposit match up to $100 over there at prizepicks.com. Great for the game tonight. Hockey playoffs going on, baseball as well. Check it out, prizepicks.com/CLNS. And so what are you looking for tonight? What's it going to take for the Pacers to extend this series that they weren't able to do there in Game 5?
Yeah, well, first you need something from Tyrese Haliburton. Now 2 of the 5 games, he really hasn't shown up, hasn't contributed much. And this is a guy who's going to start a max contract starting July 1. And now we're very curious also to see Bobby, like, is he going to get all NBA, which would then trigger the Supermax for his contract? Obviously, that's already.
Did he hit the 65 games?
He did. Yeah. What was
Wow.
really fascinating, but also a little rushed in my opinion. But he came back after he came back at Portland. It was like January 30th. Didn't look good. Felt a setback after missing a couple
he got
weeks.
hurt against the Celtics.
That was
if
Pascal
you remember.
Siakam's debut. So he was dealing with the left hamstring, came back too early, missed a few more games. But then once he came back permanently, then he didn't miss another game. So he had like a 4-game buffer that he never even got close to ultimately.
You think that's what's knocked him off consistency-wise in the second half here, just coming back from that and trying to find his footing? Because it's been a weird second half for him after, like you mentioned, all NBA level first half.
That's the primary factor, but not all. The number one thing being the left hamstring strain and rushing back. Then on top of that, he didn't get anything close to a semblance of a break during All-Star weekend. It was here in Indy. He was basically called the unofficial mayor. I thought I was busy that weekend. He did even more, going from event to event, and not telling anyone really no throughout the weekend. And then, by Monday, Tuesday, I think Tuesday they were back to practice. And it's like, well, look, like all of his teammates got away for the most part for 4 or 5 days. He got none. So I think mentally you could see for a couple weeks after that, he was just drained, had no energy on top of the hamstring. And then he's had other things come up during the playoff series. He tweaked an ankle, which bothered him for a little bit. He always wears low top shoes, which I don't think helps. But that's what many players do. And then on top of that, something kind of, I don't know if it's genetics, but something he's dealt with probably since middle school. It's just kind of the low back area, tightness, soreness, discomfort there. But I will note, going into tonight's game, it's the first time since Game 4 against Milwaukee that he has not been on the injury report. So to me, maybe you use that to say he's feeling as the best that he has since early in their last playoff series.
What have you thought of the Siakam experience overall so far? Has it gone expectations? Has there been some adjustment?
Yeah, I would say overall, slightly below, I think, expectations, only because you haven't seen a pure takeover or helping the team hold their own while maybe Halliburton's not playing well or not feeling himself. The reason you go and get a player like that is, one, no player that caliber who's all NBA type, all-star type, that's won a title, has ever signed with the Pacers in free agency. Their best free agent of all time is probably David West. Great signing, but nothing seismic, nothing substantial. But he was a key cog, a key piece, the voice of the locker room for 6 years, and they desperately miss a piece like that, quite frankly. The other thing with Siakam is, sometimes I think he tries to fit in too much, and I'd like to see him be a little bit more assertive. And to that point, though, I think I'd like to see his teammates get him involved more and get him more looks on the post. And the difference, though, is the contrast in styles. Is the Pacers in general want to play fast. I think they were the second highest paced team in the league, behind maybe Boston, highest scoring team historically, based on this season. And in the offseason, they signed Obi Toppin, or traded for Obi Toppin. They signed for Bruce Brown, two of the fastest, best players in transition. Siakam, more slow it down, more methodical, more work it in the post. So I think that's been a back and forth. But I think regular season, just fine, exactly what you expected. I'd like to see more in the postseason.
Yeah, and they got the offense top to bottom here. I'm looking in this series right now. You got 6 players averaging double figures for Indiana here, including Andrew Nembhard.
Which is exactly what they did during the regular season. I
Yeah.
think depth is a little hyped in the playoffs. I think it can be overkill, but in the regular season, it's huge, and it was huge for this Pacers team.
How much of a factor has the defense been in this series? Because that's been the conversation around them all years. You got this great offense. You play with this great pace. They're shooting excellent in this series, too, it looks like, 42% from 3. But the defense, can you get stops the other way? How big of a story is that going to be in terms of what this season ends up being if they do fall short here?
Yeah, it's a primary focus just because they're not a great defensive team, but they don't have to be that great. They just can't be awful. That's the thing.
Yeah.
And early on in the season, the first 3.5 months or so, it was pitiful. Just the lack of communication, the number of times they had to use timeouts. Like we did see in game 5, I will say. I think Rick Carlisle burned a quick 5 timeouts. Like he is not afraid to call the quick trigger, whether it's even 30 seconds into a game or a half. I think
That
it's
would be a
kind
real
of
contrast between him and Joe.
okay.
If that
Yeah,
series ends up happening.
it's just been a complete 180, I think, a little bit in terms of defense, how it's gotten better. But you take a look at burning the timeouts. And to the positive, though, they have changed some assignments and some things have worked out. One of the big moves was when the series shifted here to Indy in game 3. You moved Nesmith over on Jalen Brunson, went with size rather than physicality from Andrew Nembhard. That's been a positive. So, too, has been TJ McConnell on him, which has helped. They have no stopper out there. I think that's their biggest need. Probably every team could use more of those, is that 3-and-D guy that you could confidently throw on any player out there that's disruptive, that throws length on them. I love a guy like Jaden McDaniels. Like you could always say a Kawhi, a PG, like of course, but like strictly defense, I'm thinking several of the Pelicans players, or even a guy like Jaden McDaniels, Herb Jones. Yeah. But so defense it will definitely be a struggle and something to watch here. It's just, what kind of contributions do the Knicks get from Josh Hart, from DiVincenzo, who's torn them up for a couple of games, then got a little exhausted. You could see right in the Pacers game 4 blowout of them, but then a good turnaround in game 5. So that's something to watch.
Yeah, what have you thought about the Knicks and if they're going to move on here to face
Yeah.
Boston, what kind of threat they'd pose?
They're so much fun to watch. I don't think anyone's a threat to the Celtics pending health, right? So Porzingis, we'll see what his status looks like. And I mean, getting to the finals. After that, I picked at the beginning of the season Denver to repeat. I still think that's probably what I'm going to stay with here, just because I love, first of all, Jokic, easily the best player in the league. You have that experience, you have that toughness, the fact that they bounce back from the 0-2 start. But then with the Celtics in particular, I just think it would pend health. I've really liked what I've seen from this New York team. It's weird to have a likable New York team, I feel like. But I think a lot of it just comes from the Villanova Knicks, Bobby. That's what I'm seeing. That's what they don't make excuses. They play their hearts out. They play almost every single minute, and they play hard. I mean, how could you not root for a team like that?
Yeah, and when you look at the numbers from the series, the Pacers have outshot the Knicks pretty badly, like 57 of 54 in effective field goal. That's tough to overcome if you're New York here, and that they've done it by keeping the turnovers low, 10%. There's a really low number. Offensive rebounding through the charts. I mean, 32% there is just out of this world from an offensive
Mhm.
rebound standpoint. That is the kind of number
That's what's
that can
changed the
change a
series is
series.
rebounding.
Yeah. I mean, they're great there, and they're missing Robinson here. They're missing Randall, a lot of that
Yep.
size inside, and for them to still have a guy in Hartenstein who can make that level of an impact, that's their third option effectively in there. And you look at the Celtics down Porzingis, Cornette's done okay. You know, Tillman's there if he needs to be. I know the Pacers have Jalen Smith if it ever got to that. A lot of
Mhm.
teams don't have a third center this good. We talk about it all the time on this show with Cornette. I think he's serviceable. I think he's done an admirable job this year. But to bring in a guy like Hartenstein who can dominate is pretty surprising on
Mhm.
that level of a depth in a team. I know you said depth's a little overrated there, but it becomes crucial when you get this hurt like the Knicks have.
Yeah, I think more so what I meant is if you're playing 10, 11, 12 guys, right? Even
Yeah.
OKC has shrunk their rotation a little bit more. If there's health, yeah, you have that obvious need. But I mean, for example, the Pacers traded away a second round pick to try to help fill the void of trading away Buddy Hield to go get Doug McDermott. He's been a non-factor in these playoffs. That depth really hasn't mattered. Even though the team could really use another shooter out there, they could use a guy with more experience. Because for right now, the key for this season was for the Pacers to get back to the playoffs. They hadn't won a playoff series since 2014 when Paul George led this team to the Eastern Conference Finals. So that's a check mark. This is a check mark. And now you want to make some upgrades if you're the Pacers in the offseason and see where they go from there. But they've already, I think, accomplished what in general we were hoping to see from this team.
Do you think they miss Hield at all?
Absolutely. Yeah, I do more than the fans. You read Twitter, absolutely not. Fans are glad he's gone. He misses too many shots. He doesn't play defense. But the thing you got to realize that we've talked at length about, and even I'm glad Tyrese did on his last day with Buddy as a teammate, talked about just how many little things he does that draws attention on defense, whether it's just having to guard him in the corner. There's one defender spread out to the corner, because if not, they'll spray it out to him. On top of that, he was really good in transition, in particular with Tyrese. They have complete chemistry because they had played together since Tyrese had gotten into the league. You can't pick that up with anyone else so quickly. And then on top of that, just their offense and getting into actions, in particular with using ghost screens to open things up for Tyrese and everyone else, is something that has also been emphasized so much. So I think that was a trade that the Pacers probably regret, but they did it not to get rid of Buddy or to open up a roster spot, say, for a young guy like Benedict Mathurin, who's obviously out now because of season-ending surgery. But that was done to take care of their guy. They wanted to make sure Buddy was happy. Buddy's in a contract year. He felt he had fallen out of the starting lineup and somewhat has seen his minutes decrease. So by going to Philadelphia, he was looking to reach the postseason for sure for the first time in his pro career, ending that dry spell. And then also he started with the 76ers initially. So he expected to have more of a role. Now we saw that fade later on.
Yeah, it didn't quite work out the way Philly wanted to, and Morey even
Mm-hmm.
admitted that after the season there. It'd be interesting to see where he would say, especially with Mathurin out, like you said. I don't think nationally people have given that loss enough credit for how difficult it was. He was a huge part of this offense here. The bench, certainly, probably a 6-man of the year candidate if he was able to stay healthy there. So that was a huge loss, too, along with Hield there, while picking up Siakam. It's like two big pieces went out, even though one was coming in. I want to get into the Celtics a little bit
Bruce
here.
Brown too, by the way. That was a no-brainer
Bruce
to trade
Brown,
him. But you think they couldn't have used his defense and veteran experience a little bit in these playoffs? Absolutely.
especially a guy with experience in that spot,
Totally.
who's been there a couple of times and won a championship, certainly a year ago. That was a big reason they signed him. And that was short-term deal. Probably felt like he was
Mhm.
going to move on at some point, his salary in a big trade, and that's what happened. But yeah, that was a big piece going out too. I totally forgot about him because he ends up in Toronto, and you thought they might flip him, but he just ends up missing the
Totally. We all
playoffs
did.
and not being out there. Yeah, he's one of the guys who should be playing right now. That was weird
Yeah,
that
it's
they
too bad
didn't
he
end up
couldn't have
flipping him there.
gotten back with the Nuggets somehow. I know their cap situation isn't great, especially after they're going to have to start paying some more guys, I think, this offseason. But it felt like maybe one of those situations where he'd come here, he'd get his paycheck, he'd get traded elsewhere, and would somehow work his way back to Denver.
Well, game 6 is tonight. We got Bruins here in Boston tonight as well. There's a lot of big games going on right now. So if you need tickets to any of them, I know game 1 is coming up in this East Finals. It's set for Tuesday here in Boston. So you can go get tickets for any of those events. It's going to be a tough one if it's Celtics Knicks in this series. So go to the Game Time app. Get a discount on your first purchase if you haven't used it before. This is a great time to do it with pretty tight ticket market coming up for this next series here. Game Time, though, there's always great deals right up until and even after Game Time on the app here. I've loved it. I've used it for years, even before we partnered with them here. Go download it, check it out. Easy to use, easy to navigate. I love the seat view, too, that they have in there. See where you're going to be sitting, see what the view's like. Just use our code CLNS for that $20 discount off your first purchase when you're over there. Terms apply. It's a Game Time app. Download it today. Create an account. Get a discount off your first purchase with our code CLNS over there. So what's been, I know you spoke pretty highly of them earlier in the show here, Scott. The Celtics, going to be heavy favorites no matter which team they end up playing here. What's been your overall thoughts on them? So Pacers have played them in some pretty competitive games throughout the year here. So they have a style that would challenge the Celtics a little bit here, just in terms of speeding up the pace. Celtics like to play fast, but not that fast. I don't think any team likes to play as fast as the Pacers do.
Yeah.
What's been your thoughts on them looking like they're going to go to the finals here?
Yeah, and that was all expectations. And I'll give credit to Joe Mazzulla. I don't know why he wasn't one of the top favorites for Coach of the Year. I think it is so difficult to manage a situation like that because I always say, too, more than anything now, especially in the pros, more than other leagues, is so much about being a head coach no longer is about coaching. It's managing egos, managing personalities, roles, dealing with agents, all those different things that go into being a head coach versus, rather than just the X's and O's. So I think he's managed that quite well. And I probably would have had him among my top 3 for Coach of the Year, just the job he did and get them to where they were clearly the class of the East and dominant and had an incredible home record, right? Like, that was the other thing that stands out and why another reason you would expect them to reach the finals. Now, Porzingis being out certainly is a yellow flag out there a little bit. You got to be concerned with that. When will he return? If he does, what does he look like? But if you're talking against the Pacers, there's such a challenge just because of the threats that they have. And it all goes back to the Pacers not really having any great defenders. They have a couple solid defenders. You got, so where do you put them up against, right? Like, you got to take care of Drew, but wait, there's Jalen and there's Jason. Like, it's kind of pick your poison, I feel like. It would be fun for me selfishly because you have the Aaron Nesmith story, how he's really grown into his role here in Indy, more so just because of an opportunity. He was deep in the depth chart with the Celtics, but he was part of that finals appearance team. So that would be fun from him. It's too bad Daniel Tice isn't on the team, or you would have that as well. But Pacers did not need an additional big there. But this team has such respect in particular for Drew Holiday. I mean, Rick Carlisle, you'd think he had coached Drew Holiday for 10 years based on the way he compliments him and doesn't like going up against him because he knows he's probably going to kick him, take care of him. And so, there would be a lot of difficulties there. But we'll see. Pacers have a long way to go to even get there now, having to win a couple more games. But I think either way, Knicks or Pacers, I can't see it going more than 6 games either way.
Yeah, and they played 5 times this year because of the tournament. The first game was a non-Haliburton game. Celtics dropped 155, so you can kind of toss that one aside. The second one...
That was awful. Yeah.
That was when the defense was at rock bottom this year for Indiana.
Yep. 41-point game, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was the most points the Celtics scored in a game this year. Second game, Indiana took Haliburton was there for that game. I think he had a triple-double. Third game, Celtics took 38 from Tatum, probably one of his better games of this season. And then the fourth one was that Buddy Hield finish where he looked like he fouled Jalen, but didn't. So they don't go to the line to tie it there, and the Pacers escape, dropping 133 in that game, which is pretty impressive against the Celtics defense. Porzingis was there for that one. He was not for the in-season tournament game, and that definitely hurt Boston there. I think White was out for that loss, though, which was pretty
Don't those
important. I
things
thought
so long ago? Like, I remember
yeah.
there wasn't there a back-to-back home games in Indy, like January 5th and 8th, and one of them was where Tyrese did the splits and suffered that hamstring strain. So
I think that was the one Indiana actually won. They escaped after he got hurt.
because they had no business doing that. I think he went out, I want to say like 9 minutes into the game. He was slipping on the floor all over. Went out, went to the locker room, didn't even return. And I think the Pacers maybe even got down 20, I want to say, and still ended up winning, but then lost the follow-up game. That's the vivid memory I have, that 41-point loss early on without Ty, and then Ty getting hurt.
Yeah, and then Nesmith was really good in that last game they played in Boston, 26, 12, and 7. They took it down to the crunch time there, and he had a 3 to tie it in the corner, but Derek White blocked them. So they played some good games this year, memorable games. Nesmith, like you mentioned there, a big part of it. He's one of these guys, we just saw it in Max Strus too last game, who really embraces the fact that the Celtics let him go and wants to get back at them often whenever he can. And I got to say, I love covering him, and I love seeing him play well there. I know he hasn't played great in this series shooting-wise, but he's an NBA player. And I don't know if he's a starter. He's been a starter on this team more often than not, when they've tried to find their 4 before Siakam came in. But it's been great to see him just look comfortable there. This team style really seems to fit him. And that was obviously a big win in that trade. Brogdon was probably going to be out of there anyway, and he comes back as sort of a throw-in and ends up being a borderline starting player for this team who got an extension. So I love that storyline too here.
Yeah, I don't think they nearly had this kind of expectation. They were hopeful, and that had been one of the areas this front office has targeted, is those underutilized or misused in some cases players. Even think, Domantas Sabonis, he was like a stretch 4 for a year down in OKC, or Oladipo played off the ball and did very little in Russell Westbrook's MVP year. So those were 2 guys they had targeted. And I think Nesmith maybe and definitely falls in that category, guy that couldn't crack the floor just because of the guys in front of him. But let's not make any mistake. The point of the Pacers was to offload Malcolm Brogdon in his contract. They got a first round in return. If I remember correctly, that became Andrew Nembhard, I think, pick 31. I could be wrong about that, but it turned out to be a really good pick that they've benefited from greatly, on top of what they were able to do. They had to take on some into the bench contracts. They ultimately bought out Daniel Tice for nothing, which I still don't understand. There had to be some kind of value they could have gotten in return, but otherwise, I think that was a net positive trade for the Pacers.
Yeah, that was weird. He wasn't playing early in the year either for them. After looking decent at times, I know he was hurt a lot last year too. Not playing much, but went on the Clippers, gave them some good value there on the buyout. So what would you have this series at if it does end up happening here? I know you're not super hopeful, but what would it look like? How many games would you see it going? Just what would the East Finals look like if we do somehow get Pacers Celtics here?
Yeah, you'd have a huge advantage for the Celtics in terms of rest, right? The fact that they're off. Yep. And again, going back to my point to reiterate it, it's every other day, which I don't like, whether there was rest or not, like I've just been talking about. So that would drastically favor the Celtics. I would think there's a chance they could push it to 6 just because of the Pacers' success on their home court. I would certainly think somehow the Celtics would give one away. It just seems like that's the area that concerns me about the Celtics in the playoffs. There's a couple times where they might let off the gas or just like have a questionable game. Like, how do you lose it?
Game 2
like that
at
Cavs
home.
game? Like, what are you doing?
Yeah. So they've done that twice now this postseason, and they've gotten those series done in 5. Maybe they would get this one done in 5 as well if it comes to that. But Pacers did get 2 against them this year. It's a different team. It's a fatigue team coming out of this series, as you mentioned there. It's a huge advantage so far for the Celtics that they've had rest time. And
I don't think they've seen this iteration of the Pacers with Siakam. I could be wrong on that, but like their series with the Bucks during the regular season, I thought maybe their series with the Celtics ended in January, even before that trade, which again
He did have
presents
one
a
game
whole new
against
element.
them, that last one.
One, okay.
Yeah. So that was a close game, and he was a big part of that. 9 of 16, got some looks inside, 23
Okay.
points. So there'd be competitive games here for sure. And it's funny. Every round the Celtics have faced a team that looks like they could compete early on, and then that team just falls apart physically
Yeah.
as the series goes on. Obviously, Butler never played in round one. That Cavs series looked like it could have been competitive, and then Mitchell goes down and it's over. And so, would the Pacers even hold up here with all the games, all the minutes, the pace they've played at, some of the injury concerns like you've talked about? Like, it could be one where maybe they steal one early and then they're just too tired and beat up the rest of the way to go any more than 5 games. And that's probably what I would put it at, just because of the defense. The Celtics are so good at attacking mismatches, and that would be a problem for the Pacers with Haliburton out there and some of the other guys that they played. I know McConnell would probably be key in that series. Nesmith, like you said, got some size in Siakam there. So maybe they're a little better suited than they were early in the year to muster some defense in this series. But Celtics have been waiting for this kind of defense to really open up their offense because it was a tough one in rounds 1 and 2. I'd probably go 5 games here.
I probably would as well. It's funny you mentioned the Celtics opponents, and it just reiterates. I hate how this playoffs, to me at least, have really again been defined by injuries and who's not available. Right, like Jimmy Butler being out, no one wants to see that. And then you go to this last series, Donovan Mitchell can't play in the last 2 games, and they have other injury concerns as well. And Porzingis is out, by the way. I don't like that. Same thing against the Pacers. I want to see I'm really curious to see what this Knicks team looks like next season, because I think it's a team a lot of people would get on board with if it wasn't the New York brand or the market by any means, just because they play hard, they play all those minutes. And if you go the other way, I just think the Celtics would totally wear down this Knicks team. I think they would put their their foot on the throat of the Knicks and not even allow them to come up for any air here. I couldn't see that going more than 5 games as well.
Yeah, and there's a physicality component there that'll be interesting if Porzingis is out, and it looks like he'll at least miss the start of the series. No real update yet on his timeline here today. Joe Mazzulla talked a little while ago, so we'll see what happens there, but I wouldn't expect him to play in the first game or 2 of the series at the very least, and we'll see who it's going to be. Could happen tonight. Knicks win, they're on to the East Finals. Pacers win, we got a Game 7 in New York at 3:30 on Sunday. So that'll be interesting to watch. They're certainly favored tonight at home, so I give them a chance here, especially seeing what Minnesota just did out west when they looked dead in that spot. The home courts have played important in these playoffs here in a couple different series, especially this one where the home teams won every game. He's Scott Agness. He'll be there tonight. Follow along with him. Fieldhouse Files. You can find him on Twitter at Scott Agness. And he does great work over there, so definitely follow him for all your Pacers stuff. And I'm sure we'll talk again if it does end up happening, Scott. Thanks for coming on here today.
Yeah, well, really, we'll have to. Appreciate it, man. Thanks.
All right. We are also brought to you by our great sponsor, PXG, here. Another beautiful day in Boston. Go over there and check out some of their awesome gear. Shirts, polos, tees, all great stuff for the course. You know them for their golf equipment. You know them for their style too. And it's great style, awesome colors, designs, bunch of different variations of those polos, and they're lightweight, so they help you get in your swing, feel good, look good. It's important for playing good out there. So check out pxg.com/Garden Report. Use our code Garden Report at checkout to save 10% on all apparel over there. Love PXG. Go check them out, all their offerings. And next time when you're on the course, you're going to be glad you did. It's a great feel for being out there swinging and even just relaxing. Great leisure wear as well for the summer. And now's the time to buy. It's getting warm out there. pxg.com/Garden Report. Thanks again to Scott Agness. Thanks for tuning in, everybody, here this afternoon. We got a long layoff. Celtics not practicing until Sunday. So we'll see if they have an opponent that day. Certainly could here. Scott not super confident that the Pacers are going to extend this thing. I think they might. And I certainly am rooting for Celtics Knicks more than anything here. But this Indiana team hasn't died easily all year, and the Knicks still dealing with some losses there. OG Anunoby is out for this game tonight. So we'll check it out. 8:30 tonight. We'll have Noah and our studio edition of the Garden Report coming Sunday afternoon. Could be after a Game 7 there, and we'll recap that if so, or dive deeper into what the Knicks will look like next series, if that's what happens tonight. Garden Report preview here, full crew, probably going to happen Monday. Wait for that. We got a long layoff here. We really do. And we'll get a Knicks preview tomorrow. Go talk to someone on that Knicks side and see what they're going to bring to this series. It really would be fun if that ends up happening here. But in the meantime, there's been the Garden Report. Celtics on to round 3, East Finals. It's going to be Pacers or Knicks at this point. So we will await that opponent just like the Celtics are right now. And it gets started on Tuesday at 8 o'clock here in Boston. Again, if you want tickets, go check out the Game Time app. Use that code CLNS for a discount on your first purchase. Of course, terms apply. And any given game night, we got Bruins tonight. Go check out Prize Picks, stat projections for each player. Pick a couple players, pick more or less, and you're off. 2 to 6 players. You can win many times your money over there. So go get a deposit match up to $100 with our code CLNS. Again, I'm Bobby Manning. This has been a off-day edition of the Garden Report. We will talk to you tomorrow.